A Christmas Carol Summary. By Audiobook Academy. Charles Dickens wrote the novella A Christmas Carol. In this tale, Ebenezer Scrooge, a nasty and greedy old man, is shown as a hater of all things Christmas. A gentler and kinder Scrooge emerges through his encounters with the spirits of Christmas past, present, and future. The Ghost of Marley. On a chilly Christmas Eve in London, Ebenezer Scrooge, a cunning but cold-hearted penny pincher, toiled diligently in his counting house. Signs reading Scrooge and Marley were posted outside the office. Jacob Marley, Scrooge's business partner, died 7 years ago. Scrooge kept a close eye on his writer, a tiny man named Bob Cratchit, at the office. Despite the small size of Bob's chamber, the embers from the fireplace offered some warmth. Scrooge refused to pay for additional coal to keep his workplace warm despite the harsh weather. A young man entered the office unexpectedly and wished everyone a happy Christmas season. He turned out to be Fred, Scrooge's upbeat nephew, who dropped by to invite Scrooge to Christmas dinner. It was a bah! Humbug! From the miserly Scrooge in response to Fred's Christmas cheer. They enter the office after Fred has left to ask Scrooge for a charitable donation on behalf of the needy. Scrooge scolded the gentlemen for their lack of generosity, saying that he only supported workhouses and jails. On Christmas Day, Scrooge confronts Bob Cratchit and chastises him for wanting to take a day off to celebrate the holiday with family. Scrooge snarls, "What good is Christmas if it causes businesses to be closed?" Although he reluctantly agreed to grant Bob a day off, he asked that the next day, Bob report to work an hour earlier. Even though it wasn't Christmas, Scrooge went about his business as usual, eating dinner in his regular tavern and making his way back home through the streets of London. Before entering the house, he saw the door knocker he'd already seen twice that day. He was startled when he saw the knocker's eerie image. It was Jacob Marley, his former business partner. On closer inspection, Scrooge only spotted a door knocker. He pushed through the door and entered his squalid dwelling. He didn't put any effort into illuminating his house. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. A locomotive appeared alongside him as he crept up the steps, despite his complete skepticism. In his bedroom, he locked the door and put on his nightgown before going to sleep. Jacob Marley's visage appeared on his mantel as he ate his gruel in front of the fire. Scrooge screamed humbug, as he was unable to focus on the strange visuals. A cacophony of jingling bells erupted from the tables. On the stairwell, Scrooge could hear heavy footsteps. He peered through the locked door and saw a ghostly figure. Jacob Marley appeared in the form of a transparent, chained figure. This is Marley's expression. It had a gloomy glow to it, like a rotten lobster in a dark cellar, but it was not completely obscured by the shadows of the other objects in the yard. Ghostly specks were raised up on its ghostly brow, and it peered at Scrooge in the same way Marley used to look at Scrooge. Though the eyes were open, they remained completely still. The hair seemed to be agitated by a gust of heated air. Although its livid color and its ghoulish appearance made it harrowing, it appeared to be a terror that was not part of the face's expression, but rather a result of it. In disbelief, Scrooge screamed, a peculiar case of food illness, and refused to believe that he had seen Marley's ghost. For 7 years, the ghost mumbled incoherently, claiming that he was punished for all of his transgressions. This is a chain formed out of steel purses, ledgers, locks, and cash boxes, according to Scrooge's observation. For this reason, he was brought back from the dead to help Scrooge avoid the same tragedy. Marley predicted that Scrooge would be visited by the 3 ghosts during the next 3 days. One at 1 o'clock in the morning, and one at midnight will be his first visitors. When Scrooge climbed to his feet and turned away from the window, it suddenly burst open, frightening the frightened old miser. In the window, Scrooge saw a group of ghosts, each of whom was chained up. They all bemoaned their good deeds and the fact that they couldn't aid those in need despite their good deeds. The moment Scrooge stumbled into his bed, he dozed off. The first spirit. Scrooge awoke around 12 o'clock in the morning, perplexed. He finally fell asleep around 2 o'clock. Marley's ghost's comments brought him back to reality, and he realized it was either midday or he had slept through the entire day. When the clock strikes 1, he'll see the first of 3 ghosts. Scrooge decided to wait patiently for his guest. At 1 o'clock, Scrooge spotted a childlike figure who was radiating wisdom and experience. The phantom wore a hat to conceal the light emanating from its brow. "I am the ghost of Christmas past," he said softly, "and I command you to rise and go with me." Scrooge was given the ability to fly by the ghost. It was through the window that they were able to escape. Scrooge was sent back to his childhood home in the country by the ghost. He ran into old acquaintances, went back to school, and visited some of the places he remembered from his youth. Scrooge wept as he remembered the past. Ebenezer Scrooge's son, a young Ebenezer Scrooge, was spending the Christmas vacation alone at school. Scrooge was taken on a tour of his former Christmases by the spirit. Finally, Fan Scrooge's little sister hurried into the room and announced that she had come to take Ebenezer home with her. Ebenezer can return home, according to their father, according to their mother. The child exclaimed, "Yes," with a smile on her face. "It's fantastic to be back. It's where you'll always be. Home feels like heaven now because Father is so more gentler than he used to be. That night, when I was about to sleep, he talked so softly to me that I was not frightened to ask him again whether you might come home, and he responded yes, you should, and sent me in a coach to bring you." The child opened her eyes and cried, "And you're to be a man. And you're never to come back here," she said. "But first, we're to stay together all Christmas long, and have the merriest time in all the world." Scrooge embraced his sister with excitement when he saw her. His sister Fan, who died many years ago, is Fred's mother. At Fezziwig, Scrooge's former shopkeeper and the host of this year's Christmas party, the Ghost of Christmas Past joined Scrooge. Later, Scrooge observed a younger version of himself conversing with a stunning young woman named Belle and a somewhat older version of himself. Scrooge's love had been tainted by his greed, she said as she called off their engagement. Scrooge was sent to a more contemporary Christmas setting, where he observed a middle-aged Belle and her husband arguing about her previous fiancé, Scrooge, who was now married. Quite alone in the world, Belle's husband stated of her ex-fiancé. With no other option, he made an emotional plea to Santa Claus to bring him back to this time of year. Scrooge, saddened and dejected, took the spirit's hat and pulled it over his head, dimming the light until he was back in his own chamber, where he immediately went to bed and fell asleep. The second spirit. When the church clock struck 1, Scrooge was already awake. As soon as the second ghost appeared, he planned to confront it. As the last of the church bells chimes went away, the passage of time ensured that no ghost would come. A bright light began to shine down on Scrooge after he had waited for about 15 minutes and was ready to go to sleep. Scrooge was curious, so he went into the other room and found the second ghost. The moment Scrooge's hand was on the lock, a strange voice called him by his name, and bade him enter. He obeyed. He appeared to Scrooge as a majestic figure, a giant who sat atop the throne and proclaimed that he was the Ghost of Christmas Future with a powerful voice. When he instructed Scrooge to touch his robe, the room vanished in an instant. A few minutes later, Scrooge found himself in the heart of town on Christmas morning, next to the Ghost of Christmas Past. People were merry and bright as they strolled by, toting present bags and exchanging Merry Christmas greetings. Bob Cratchit's family prepared a Christmas dinner and Scrooge was taken there by the ghost of Bob Cratchit's wife and children to smell the few Christmas meals they could buy. A few minutes after Martha's return from work at a millinery, Bob called to say that she had arrived home safely. In a stiff collared shirt his father had given him, Peter, his eldest son, wore a stiff collared shirt, and Bob entered the room with his youngest son Tiny Tim, who was disabled and unable to walk. Despite a mediocre Christmas supper, the family was content. If Tiny Tim survived, Scrooge implored the ghost to let him know. Considering the existing state of affairs, the ghost informed him that the Cratchit house's Christmas dinner table will be empty next year. "No, no," said Scrooge. "Oh, no, kind spirit. Say he will be spared. In the event that the future alters these shadows, no one from the ghost's race will be able to find him here." "Then what? If he's going to die, he might as well do it now and reduce the population boom." While listening to the spirit recount Scrooge's own words, Scrooge lowered his head and was overtaken with regret and sorrow. Many Christmas feasts were visited by the ghost, including the secluded community miners and a ship's Christmas parties. It was at Fred's Christmas party that Scrooge lost several games and even had some fun, despite the fact that no one at the party could see him at all. Spirit became more mature as the night went on. This ended with him showing him children dying of famine in the middle of a barren landscape. Want and ignorance were their monikers. It was Scrooge's wish to help the destitute children that the spirit answered. "Are there no prisons?" Scrooge had said earlier in the story. "Workhouses don't exist?" Scrooge glanced at a hooded phantom as the clock struck midnight and the apparition drifted away. The last spirit, Ghost of Christmas Future, approached Scrooge, who kneeled before him, and inquired as to whether or not he was indeed the Ghost of Christmas Past. Scrooge twitched in fear when the phantom didn't respond. Scrooge was still reeling from his previous encounters with the ghosts, and he implored the ghost to share his lesson, hoping to avoid the same fate as his deceased business partner. Scrooge saw a gathering of merchants discussing the death of a wealthy man at the London Stock Exchange, where he was taken by the spirit. A pawnshop was seen selling stolen goods from a dead man's personal possessions. On his way back to his house, Scrooge passed by the dinner table of an impoverished family, where a woman and husband were celebrating the death of an intolerant debtor, and the Cratchit household, which was still mourning the loss of Tiny Tim. After Scrooge begged the spirit for information, he explained that he had learned the lesson of the silent spirit and that he now knew the identify of the dead man. He ended up in a churchyard, where a ghost led him to a graveyard where he'd never been before. Ebenezer Scrooge, read the inscription as Scrooge neared the tomb. Scrooge was stunned and pleaded with the ghost to reverse everything he had seen. A year later, he vowed to honor Christmas and abide by the principles that all three spirits had taught him. When Scrooge cried out for mercy and the spirit's hand began to shake, the phantom's garment shrank and it vanished. "Hear me, spirit," he shouted, holding its robe tightly in his hands. "I no longer resemble the man I used to be. In the absence of this encounter, I will not be the man I should have been. What's the use of showing it to me if I've lost all hope?" For the first time the hand appeared to shake. "Your nature intercedes for me and pities me, good spirit," he pursued as he fell to the ground before it. "Is it possible for me to change the shadows you have cast on my life by altering my circumstances?" Back in his own bed went Ebenezer Scrooge once more. The ending. Scrooge thanked the ghosts and his partner, Jacob Marley, for the second chance he had been given. Scrooge began shouting "Merry Christmas" the moment he discovered it was Christmas morning. With a pat on the hand, Scrooge declared, "I shall love it as long as I live. It's something I hadn't noticed before." Ah, what a sincere look on its face. It's a fantastic door slammer, the turkey is shown here. Hello. Whoop. What's up? Happy holiday. He was so giddy with anticipation that he hardly dressed and danced the entire while he shaved. Scrooge dashed onto the street and offered to give a hefty sum to the first boy he met if the boy would deliver Bob Cratchit's house a large Christmas turkey. It didn't take him long to meet the gentleman who had sought for charity earlier and even apologized for his previous disrespect by pledging to pay large sums of money to their charity. Scrooge's behavior at Fred's Christmas dinner was so unexpected that the other attendees couldn't believe their eyes. Scrooge arrived at his office early the next morning and observed Bob Cratchit's anxious countenance when he arrived late. Scrooge, feigning revulsion, proceeded to chastise Bob, but then said that he plans to give him a substantial raise and help his impoverished family. Initially, Bob was taken aback and doubted Scrooge's words, but he swore to keep his word. As time went on, Scrooge helped the Cratchits and adopted Tiny Tim, who did not die as the ghost had predicted. A lot of people were perplexed by Scrooge's behavior, but he shrugged off their questions and worries. He respected the lessons he gained from Christmas spirits more than anybody else, bringing a little Christmas spirit into every day. According to Tiny Tim and Scrooge's thoughts and words, "God bless us, everyone," is how the narrator closes the story. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.